All right. Welcome back to the Believe You Are a Good Mom podcast. I am Emily Wardrop, your host. Emily Wardrop from Drop the War Life Coaching, where we drop power struggle wars with our kiddos to create more peace in our parenting. And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife is here. Hi, Dr. Jennifer.
Hi.
So I first just want to say, if anyone feels like they see any problems in the world or in their culture and they want to make a difference and they feel like one person cannot make a difference, Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife, I'm going to get emotional, is an example that one person can make a difference. So, Jennifer, can you introduce yourself a little bit before I gush on?
Sure. So yes, I'm Jennifer Finlayson-Fife, and I'm a therapist and coach and educator, and I work primarily with LDS couples and individuals around how to create a more peaceful relationship with oneself, both emotionally and sexually, and a more peaceful relationship with one's spouse if you're married.
Yeah.
And so my focus is really kind of how to relate to our bodies and our sexuality and our desires in a way that creates goodness in the world and peace in our lives.
Awesome. So fun. Okay. So I'm usually speaking to an audience of moms of young kids, right? Mm-hmm. And so we've maybe recently gotten married, had some kids, and trying to figure out life, right?
Yes.
And being married. Right. So I have 5 kids, and people ask me all the time, which was the hardest transition from 2 kids to 3, from 3 to 4, and I say from single to married.
Yeah.
And for sure from 0 kids to 1 kid, I feel like that was the hardest.
Yes, for sure.
And so just getting this figured out, right? How to live with another human being in peace, right? That's kind of a tall order. So I kind of think of you as the queen of differentiation. So if let's start with like a working definition of what differentiation means, and then kind of take it from there.
So I just need to ask for forgiveness from the listening audience because I'm outside for this recording. So I suddenly hear like crickets or something. I'm not sure what they are.
Awesome.
So hopefully you can't hear them very much, but we're in a tiny Airbnb and there is literally no place to be inside. So what differentiation? It's a big word, but basically what it means is psychological maturity. And what that means is our ability to regulate our sense of self and know our own thoughts and our own feelings and our own desires, even when we're in close connection with others. Right off and you don't really care about others, but it's really not that. It's this ability to balance connection to others and connection to oneself in a mature way. How do I attend to my responsibilities to others and also be true to the best in me? That's the hallmark of a differentiated person, is the one who can do that with wisdom. So the differentiated person is actually more able to be invested in her children, more able to be in an intimate relationship and feel that she can be true to herself and not feel that the life's being sucked out of her. Because when we're immature, we often feel like we get one or the other. I can belong to myself and be selfish, or I can be good to others and be selfless, but I may suffer and be unhappy in the process. And, a lot of my work in working with LDS women is a lot of women have felt like, well, I can't be selfish, so I need to be selfless. And that's often why the transition into marriage, there's other reasons, but, transition to marriage and children can be really difficult, is because a lot of women feel like they are literally losing themselves in the process. They've handed over their name, they're taking on their husband's name. They now are up to their elbows in needs, children, and, especially if you have a special needs child, it's all about everyone else, and you're kind of losing yourself in the process. And a lot of women learn, to be a good wife is to kind of sacrifice your desires for those of your husbands. And so there's often a pull in the direction of loss of self that can be very painful and difficult, and make it difficult to be happy or to even be not only true to yourself, but even true to your relationships, even
Mhm.
if you're sacrificing a lot for them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because if we've given up ourself, then we're not even there in the relationship anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so
That's right. And we
how?
often have expectations in our relationships that we don't even track when we've given up too much of ourselves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of expecting them to do the same or
Yes, or
reciprocate in
be there
some
or
way.
reassure us or tell us we're great, tell us we're a good mom, and adolescents aren't very good at that.
Right. Yeah. Or even those of us who got married in our 30s and
Yes, exactly.
So how exactly do we do this? How do we stay true to ourselves and kind of stay in the middle
Well,
of that
first I
balance?
think, and this is a lot of the work that I do in my Art of Desire course, is I'm taking, challenging a little bit that this is the hallmark of goodness, is to lose yourself in the care of others.
Yeah.
Now, there is an understanding of that I fully am on board with, which we can maybe get to, which I do think there's some loss of ego that matters to do what is good. But it doesn't mean that you just compromise your own well-being, your own functioning, overfunction for other people. That's not what it means to sacrifice ego. So the first order is to rethink how we've thought about what it means to be a good mother, or what it means to be a good woman, is that you are elevating all, in yourself included, and you're doing what you believe is the greater good in a situation, which may sometimes mean giving up something you desire because you really see there's another desire, need, expectation that you believe is more important than your personal wish. But at other times, it means being able and willing to attend to things that matter to you and are important to you, and asking for sacrifice from others. And so when a group is thriving or a family is thriving, nobody is getting taken advantage of in that group, right? There is the ability to think about, how do we all thrive here? Now, motherhood is a particularly, this is also true for men, make many sacrifices for their families as well. But I think when we're in the throes of young motherhood, it is a very self-suppressing time, just biologically speaking.
Yeah.
So that is, I know when I was home, so I got my PhD just as my second child was, he literally, I took him across the stage when he was about a week old. And then I stayed home during that period. And my oldest child was diagnosed with autism shortly, right before my second child was born. And so it was a very, very intensive time. I chose to stay home as an act of desire. It's really what I wanted to do of my options. But it was nonetheless a time where I went from where I'm kind of in charge of my life to a period where, even though I had chosen it, getting a shower was always a question. And it was a very literal question, because I had a newborn, a special needs child, and a husband who started traveling. And so my ability to go exercise, just to get a good night's sleep, all that was up for grabs. It wasn't happening. So now it was difficult because, of course, we all want, in a legitimate way, time to belong to ourselves. There were lots of righteous desires, to put it that way, good things that I wanted: to decorate my house, to make it cuter, to have time to myself, to be able to cook a meal that I thought I could put some energy and time into. I just couldn't do it at that time. And so it was difficult because it's just how the circumstances were. And so I think that is true, that a lot of women are choosing to go through a period of time, especially when kids are really small and really dependent, of loss of self.
Yeah.
I think the antidote to that, I think what makes it worse is if we think, well, I have to do this.
Yeah.
If I'm being a righteous woman, if I'm doing the right things, if I'm being the kind of person I should be, I shouldn't even want something other than doing this. And that just makes it way worse. And that's where you feel more and more of yourself, even that your desires are wrong. I think what works better is if a woman chooses to stay. I mean, first of all, to have a choice.
Yeah.
Makes a big difference. If you feel like you don't have a choice, that's much harder. But I have a choice. And if I'm saying this is of my options, the one that I value the most, even though this is very, very difficult, I'm still have a self in it because I'm saying this is what I believe is the best thing. As difficult as this is, even though it's much harder than what my husband's currently doing, right? Or, even though this is requiring muscles I didn't even know one could have, okay, that this is still where I want to be. Well, I think that's a way of bringing yourself into the self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because you're being true to a value of yours while you put on the shelf for a period of time other valuable things that you desire.
Yeah. And then reminding ourselves of that all day long. Because like you
That's
said,
right.
you chose it, but that
Yes.
doesn't make it easier each, moment of the day. So when the baby wakes
100%.
up and is crying in their bed, we resent the baby when we're like, oh, I wanted to keep watching my show, but I got to get up and get the baby. But if we're like, I want to go get the baby,
That's right.
We
That's
haven't
right.
lost ourselves. We still have our
Yes.
agency there.
Exactly. And it's just reminding ourselves, I don't have to get up.
Yeah.
Some people don't get up. They let their baby suffer. Okay.
Yeah.
But I, of my options, choose this. And
Yeah.
it's helpful. It really is, because the human mind does not like feeling controlled. And if we construct our life, I mean, the research on depression is this: if you put an external locus of control on your choices, you will get depressed and more anxious. When you're like, no, I'm the chooser. I remember being somewhat depressed when I was in middle school. I hated school. And my mom had been listening to some recordings on, positive thinking and so on. And it really was actually very helpful for me, because I remember thinking, I don't have to go to school. I can choose it. And of my options, that's still the choice I prefer. And it really did help, because it took me from the place of I'm just being acted upon by the world to I'm an actor in the world.
Yeah.
And, when you have young children, I mean, they're going to act upon you. Okay. They will. They're going to want things and pressure you in ways. But to always remember, like, look, I made the choice to have that reality. That's what I have wanted. And so it doesn't make sense, and it isn't fair to resent these people I invited into my life.
Yeah. For
coming and being babies and children and having expectations precisely like babies and children do. And so, we really, it's not only important for our own happiness, it's really important for theirs to feel that they are not burdens and unwelcome.
Yeah. Yeah. And same with husbands. Right.
Yes, exactly.
And so as we do this balancing dance of trying not to be too independent, but also not too codependent, that interdependence, I feel like it's kind of a teeter-totter balance. It's not like a one and done achieved.
That's right.
We're differentiated. That's right. Right.
Oh, yeah. Gosh, no. Yeah, 100%. And that's right. And it's just something you're constantly grappling with. I think it's really important to understand that as it's a tension that's always going to be present. How do I be true to the best in me? How do I be true to my relationships? Those aren't always easy answers.
Yeah. And
it changes from when your child is a year to when your child is 15 to when your child is 25, meaning there's different seasons and periods, and what it means to be true to the system, in a sense, like true to your own desires and needs, true to your children, is going to shift based on where they are. I mean, one of the challenges is if we as mothers need too much to be needed to feel good about ourselves, is that we can, for too much time, keep kind of what I call, over functioning for our child when they no longer need us to over function for them, and not in a way letting them find their own footing, find their own capacity while you're there as a caring mentor and guide, but not that you're allowing the space that's needed. Yeah. Of course, on the other side is too much space. Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead.
And so that's what they're calling now enmeshment, right? And that's similar to differentiation, and it kind of shows up more with your kids, right? When you're too enmeshed in them. Exactly.
So there's two versions of low differentiation. So high differentiation is you're balancing that pull to be true to yourself and to your kids well. But when there's low differentiation, you are either enmeshed, as you're talking about, or you're walled off. You're too distant. You're too uninvested in your kids. You are just off doing your own thing and neglecting your responsibility to them. But enmeshment looks more like good parenting than it really is, because it's overly involved. It's involved to the detriment of your child finding their way, figuring out their own path, right? You know, I remember my daughter, who's a musician, but she's just kind of, you know, when she was like 6 years old, she would just be slower than the other kids to get her violin packed up. And so we were always late for the next thing because, you know, and the teachers would be like, don't help her, like, let her do it herself. And, you know, because if she's going to get better at this, don't get involved and just make it happen. I'm like, yeah, but then we're always late. So anyway, but that's just a snapshot of when we're sometimes running in to do for our kids things that they can and ought to learn to do for themselves. It's also when our sense of self is riding on our kids' success or riding on our kids' failures, you know, that we are taking it all personally, and our kids are trying to take care of our sense of self through their behavior.
Yeah.
Right. Don't make mom cry. Don't do. And that's another version of enmeshment.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so that's the whole message that I have here on this podcast, is that when we believe that we are a good mom, then we don't need our kids' behavior to validate that. We don't need our husbands to validate that. We've got our own back. So we have our sense of self, that we are worthy, and we are a mess, and we are a human, but it's okay.
Yeah.
And we are good.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And so then we don't have to get worried about enmeshing with our kids or being too codependent.
Well, I love that, because also when you can hold that in yourself, you can hold it in your child too. You know, like, you can be imperfect and flawed just like I am, and we're both good. You know, we're both worthy. Right.
Yeah. And then we don't have to be so hyper focused on trying to make sure that they worthily pack up their violin in a timely manner.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And worthily show up to the next class. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Be on time. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. That's right.
Okay. So I think we've kind of discussed this, but how do we stay connected as a couple when we have so much mental and physical load that we're carrying as moms of young kids? So then how do we even find time? You know, we need to take care of our own needs. We have the kids' needs. We have our husband's needs. And then, you know, sex on top of all of that, right? So if we're done with baby making sex, right? We've got all our kids. Now it's transitioning into, this is just for fun and connection. And I mean, it could have been all along also, but
sure.
But we get into a pattern of what we like to call duty sex, right? Where it's like, oh, it's my husband's needs, and I just have to take care of his needs, have to take care of the dishes, have to take care of it. You know, it's just another to-do list item. So how do we break out of that cycle?
Well, exactly. So this is something I talk a lot about in my Art of Desire class and so on. I just don't think it's a helpful idea to talk about a husband's needs. Now, some husbands out there might be like, turn that podcast off. Right? Men do not have sexual needs. Okay. We don't even have emotional needs. And I know people are like, what are you talking about? Okay. That is to say, we have emotional desires. We have sexual desires. There's things that we desire that are part of our lives being good, part of our lives being joyful, and they're legitimate desires. But a lot of times we put them in that frame of needs as a way to entitle ourselves. Okay. To say, look, I have needs. You have to fulfill my needs. Where else am I going to get them fulfilled? If the way that Emily Nagoski talks about this, who's a sex educator, she says, you know, basically a biological need is something that if you don't have it, you will, or she actually says a biological drive is something that if you don't have it, you will die. Okay. Now that is not true around sex. The reason why this matters is because when we think about ourselves as need fulfillers as women, okay, I'm comfortable with that with children. But not with a partner. A husband is not a child. A husband is a partner. And it's a partner friendship. Now, a lot of us get married to be in a role much more than to have an intimate relationship. But those are two different things. If you're going to be in a role-based marriage, it's cooperative, perhaps. You might have sex because you think, well, he has needs and I'm going to check this box. But that's not that is not supportive of creating an intimate friendship. An intimate friendship operates in a very different paradigm than needs. An intimate friendship is that we are a resource to one another in the difficulties of life and kids.
Mm-hmm.
We are partners and friends that lean on each other, support each other, care about each other, but make room for this friendship to thrive in a context of other demands. I think John Gottman talked about this, like that most happily married couples would think about it as themselves and then the world that they were trying to deal with, cope with, but they were both on the inside of this circle. If you see it as, well, I've got this, okay, I just got the kids to bed. Now I've got a big kid coming to bed who wants to have sex. He's on the outside of that circle. He's someone to manage. And, you know, a lot of people, when they come to me, they're coming in not because of frequency of sex issues per se, it's because they feel like they're on the outside of a circle with their partner, that they're being managed, not desired. Now, a lot of people might say, well, I don't even know how to desire. I'm so overwhelmed. How the heck am I supposed to now go desire him, or at least act like I desire him so he doesn't not feel desired? You know, right. I mean, that that's sort of being in the same framing. And that's why it feels impossible to solve, right? Which I understand. You know, lots of good people are trying to solve it and they're not in the right meaning frame. So, you know, what I think couples have to think about is, how do we care for each other and create a friendship in all of this stress? Well, if we're going to keep that friendship alive, we're going to prioritize it as a friendship. And what that means, right, might be different. You know, dates are a wonderful thing because it's a way of prioritizing friendship. I know when I was home with my special needs child, we really barely went on a single date because it just was too difficult to leave the house. I mean, but you know, there's still, for me and my husband, was this sense of friendship. Now, one thing that really helped with that is I had a husband who really valued what I was doing, who probably, if he had it his way, would rather be home with the kids than at work. And I knew that was true. And I knew that he thought about me during the day. And I knew that he cared about what I was handling and respected me for handling it. Like there was no condescension of like that somehow I was doing unequal work or that he was uninvolved or didn't care. I mean, so that's like way more important than a date. And I'm not dissing dates at all. Like anytime we did get to go out, I was so grateful to have that time just with him and sort of reestablish a sense of just us as a couple. But having that sense that I have a friend that cares, even if he's away from me right now, really reinforces the sense of we are friends in all this difficulty. If he came home at the end of the day and something had been difficult and I was trying to figure out how to handle it better, he was invested in understanding it or thinking about it with me or caring about the fact that I was trying to sort it out. He wasn't trying to tell me what to do or anything, just like cared about me as a person who's doing somewhat difficult work. So that cultivation of we are friends and partners is something that you're doing in the moment to moment. That, you know, and so it's more of a psychological position, because I think what a lot of couples do is that they get married, there's troubles in the marriage, they think maybe we have kids and it will make it better. The kids come along and then that's an easier relationship in a lot of ways because they adore you and they need you, and you have a lot of friends who have kids, and so sometimes in the lack of a sense of real partnering hasn't yet been established, it's easy to then kind of build your bonds with the kids, and for a husband to build his bonds with his coworkers and his employment, or just feel resentful that he's not in that bond between mother and child. And then it becomes really easy to just think, how do I keep him? How do I throw him a bone? How do I just keep him happy enough with me? But it's a misaligned system, a very natural one that happens frequently, but one that's going to make desire very, very difficult in any genuine, authentic way.
Yeah. So like you said, instead of pretending that you're desiring him or trying to fake it somehow, we got to get down to the to the foundation of the relationship. And I like how you're
That's
calling
right.
it a friendship, and
That's
to
right.
cultivate that friendship, because what I like to do is a little mental gymnastics of like, well, if something happens and I'm going to go to my girlfriends on Marco Polo very first and talk to them about it instead of go talk to him about it, like, what am I
Yeah.
thinking about them that I'm not thinking about him? So to
See, that's
cultivate
right.
a friendship is like, what am I thinking
That's
and
right.
feeling towards my girlfriends that I could be transferring those thoughts and feelings towards him instead?
Yes, it's an excellent example. Excellent idea.
So
Because what is it? Go ahead. Yeah, finish your
instead of
thought.
cultivating resentment, that all I'm thinking and
That's
feeling
right.
about him is where he's lacking or where I need more support.
That's right.
I'm not expecting that from my friends.
Exactly.
So
Precisely. That's such a good example, because we really, really burden marriages sometimes. So in some ways our expectations are too low, and in other ways our expectations are too high. So when we think, well, you should care about all this, you should be here for me, you should want to talk about these things, right? Then we don't value it for what it is. And we don't actually, we end up participating through our resentment, through our withholding, through our building bonds with easier targets. We actually create the limited friendship while blaming our partner for it.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're not actually treating it like it's something that matters to us and that we're going to cultivate something worthy there.
Yeah.
So I don't mean that you have to share only things with your spouse and somehow sharing with a friend. There's things I talk to my friends about that would not really care about or be bored with, or it's not what he thinks about, which is completely fine in my view.
Yeah.
But it's more like, do I really relate to him as my partner and my intimate partner and my sexual partner? And it's a relationship that I value and will be inconvenienced for. I think that's the thing that people care about most in their marriages is, does my partner really value me, cherish me, grateful I'm in their life, and is willing to make sacrifices for my well-being and for our collective well-being? That's the measure of the friendship.
Yeah. And am I doing that? Like flipping
and
it
exactly
around, right?
Thank you. And am I doing that? Like, I can see where my husband's not okay, but what about me? That's always the harder question,
right? And the actual only one we have any control over.
Precisely
So we got to take a look in a mirror, right?
That's right.
Okay, anything else we missed? So I like this idea of desires versus needs, right? To just reframe that. So instead of, if we're feeling resentment boggled down by all the needs that we need to we need to be meeting needs for all these kids and our husband and everyone else, maybe not so much. Maybe he has desires, and maybe we could cultivate some desire also instead of being stuck in that trap of calling it a need. Okay, so anything else we missed about differentiation, resentment? I like how you said actually the other day, hold on, let me see. I took notes on another podcast you were on. Resentment is holding other people responsible for our choices.
That's right.
Because I usually describe it as like we're blaming someone else for not meeting our needs. When we feel resentful, there's a need that's not being met, and we're thinking that someone else should be meeting it.
That's right. I think of it as like unenforceable demands. We like make demands on who a partner should be for us, who a child should be for us, how life should go for us, how long the airport line should be, for heaven's sakes. Like we make these demands on kind of how it should be. And then we resent, that it isn't conforming to our demands. Yeah. And a lot of times in relationships, we are resentful, even though we're participating. We made the choice to have the child, for example. Yeah. Right. There was no guarantee when we made that choice of how easy or difficult this child would be, or what would, whether or not we'd feel prepared for it. But we nonetheless made the choice. And it's like every time we can pull back to our personal responsibility, we empower ourselves. It feels unintuitive because we want to blame. It's a way to quickly feel superior and entitled and owed. But it makes us miserable because, again, it's an unenforceable demand on life. And the more we come back to, okay, look, I may not have choices that I like, but I am the chooser. And so how am I going to handle this? How am I going to respond to this situation? What kind of mother do I need and want to be at peace with myself, right? That's a way of being true to ourselves and true to our to our relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. So it really just always comes back to this developing our sense of self. And so
Yes.
I feel like that's kind of like the trunk of the tree, and we're out on the branches kind of trying to figure things out all the time. And it always is just kind of coming back to that. So as
That's right.
just sort of a foundational concept to focus on whenever we're feeling lost in the entitlement and resentment
Yes.
and all the things that you just mentioned. We don't like feeling that way. They feel terrible. So of course,
Yes.
it's always coming back to our sense of self, which is actually a loving and accepting of ourself is
That's
the work
right.
to do. So when we
That's
love
right.
and accept ourselves, when we know that we are good, then we can like spread that goodness out to everyone
Yes.
else. And that's what feeds our
Exactly.
tree instead of feeling so depleted all the time. Like we just
Yes.
give and give and give and give, and we've got nothing coming up through
Yep.
the trunk of our tree.
That's right. That's right. And we're giving often with a desire to get something, get a validation, get others to do things that make us comfortable. So when we're giving out of a freely chosen desire to give, it doesn't deplete us. When we're giving with the expectation that others will behave in certain ways or reinforce us or tell us that we're valuable or whatever it is, that is a really, what I would say covert contract that we're making in our relationships will deplete us because we're trying to get love in our form of giving love.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's choose desire to give. I like that.
Yeah, that's right. Right. Acting as an agent in our relationships. Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for giving us a starting place to start working on all of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then tell us where we can find more of you. How do we get the Art of Desire course, all the things?
Yeah, sure. So if you go on my website, it's my last name, which is Finlayson-Fife.com. And on my website, there are links to my podcast. So I have podcasts like this, Conversations with Dr. Jennifer, where it's just more conversations like this on spirituality, child rearing, sexuality, relationships. So you can listen to those. I have a subscription podcast where I'm working with couples anonymously, but they're real couples who are dealing with intimacy issues, sexual and emotional intimacy issues. And so you can listen to me work with a couple. And a lot of people find this very helpful because they're like, oh my gosh, this is our marriage. We do this thing. And so you can learn vicariously without having to actually go to a therapist or a coach. It's the best.
Yeah, it is.
And then I have the
hot
online
seat, feeling all stressed, answering the questions. You
Absolutely.
see yourself in
you
them.
can just see it more easily when you're like, hey, I can see that they're doing that. I now can see that I do that. It's just much easier. And then I have 5 online courses, and they're designed particularly for LDS with LDS couples in mind. But I have a strengthening your relationship course and a enhancing sexual intimacy course for couples. And then an Art of Desire course, which is the self and sexual development course I've been referencing. Art of Loving is the men's equivalent, like how to develop the ability to love and to love through sexuality for men. And then how to talk to your kids about sex course.
Yes. Yeah. Really good. All right. So we got a lot of work to do. Thank you so much for doing your work in the world so that we can all benefit from. Yeah. And thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.